Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth has a little demo that you can access once you beat Like a Dragon Gaiden, which is supposed to be a pretty small demo to give you a taste of what to expect for this upcoming game. Or at least, it's supposed to be small, because I did a few run-throughs of it, noting as many noteworthy things about the game, and I managed to gather 12 pages of dot points. I will not be going through the game files or installing mods, because I'm going to try and look at things that are mostly changed from the previous game of Yakuza Like a Dragon, which I will be referring to just as Like a Dragon throughout the video, and I'll be documenting small things that I'm sure some people will never even notice, even if they end up beating the entire game. So I'll be trying to ignore stuff that is typically new in any video game sequel, like new minigames, jobs, weapons, that sort of stuff. So with that out of the way, I will now try to be as efficient as I can in relaying to you my research that was all gathered mostly from the demo, as well as a few bits from trailers and promotional material. I'll start with the biggest change to the combat, being the fact that you can now move in battle. Previously in Like a Dragon, one of the biggest and most common complaints from people who had brains and didn't just say the combat as their biggest complaint, was the fact that you couldn't move your character at all in combat. This was a big problem, as so much of the game, especially the area of effect attacks, relied on your position, which, considering you couldn't control it, it meant that a large part of the flow of combat was down to basically RNG. They could have gone the Dragon Quest XI approach, where you can move anywhere in a specified arena but your position didn't matter at all, or they could have done just what everyone wanted them to do and let you run around freely, similar to previous games in the series. However, how it works in this is that your character can only walk within a small radius around where they were standing once their turn started. This does mean that the AI can just make you stand somewhere dumb at the start and then you have to deal with it, but after playing around with it, I actually realized why you couldn't ever move in the original, because it would have been broken. So how they've done it is very well balanced. Additionally, you can increase the radius by leveling up, or in the example of Kiryu, change fighting styles, which I'll discuss later, to either grant him a bigger or smaller movement radius. Once again though, your position in combat is vital, even if you're just kind of smacking buttons with reckless abandon, but there are several improvements made to position-based gameplay. The game will now give you an arrow which will indicate the knockback that the enemy will receive after you attack them, allowing you to aim the enemies into other enemies to deal a bit of bonus damage to multiple enemies, or hitting an enemy into something in the environment such as a wall, because now that Lost Judgment brought back wall bounding, they've now kept it in this too, which is very nice. It seems like as well that sometimes the game will intentionally point the knockback of your attacks into an enemy, or they'll home into other environmental objects to maximize your damage, making it fairly easy to aim with this mechanic. You can also smack an enemy into a party member and they can do a follow-up attack. And speaking of those arrows, the area of effect for attacks and status moves are actually shown to you, as opposed to Like a Dragon where it's just a massive guess. Maybe there'll be some in the full game, but it seems like besides the ultimate tag team attacks, which again I'll get to later, the skills from Like a Dragon that would affect every enemy or every party member regardless of where anyone is are gone, because instead things like a group heal are an area of effect. Although it's not just around the user, as you can still target a specific enemy or party member with whatever skill you're using. There's even some skills that will deal bonus damage the further away you are from the enemy, indicated by a big line that gets bigger as you get further away. And I am shocked to have realized that it does actually say further instead of farther, which is so insanely based. Weapon attacks, which were exclusive to Ichiban and exclusively a massive pain in the ass to pull off in Like a Dragon, are now available to everyone, and the game will physically prompt you to do one when you're standing close enough to a weapon. In terms of things like damage, stunning enemies, or electric signs electrocuting enemies, weapon attacks seem to work the same way. But speaking of those prompts, up at the top, the game will tell you if you're going to do some bonus thing with your attack. If you stand close enough to a party member, you can do a combo attack. If you fulfill certain conditions with Kiryu's brawler fighting style, you can do a hit action, which I don't know how the hell to trigger those because they seem super finicky. And if you stand close enough to the enemy, you'll get a proximity bonus. With a proximity bonus, you'll be able to do a stronger basic attack that can prompt you with a button to gain some extra damage, or at least the dragon job has that, because for the other characters, it's just their normal basic attack, but it seems to be about 20% or so stronger. Not too sure how the proximity bonus works. However, what I am sure about is that if you attack an enemy from behind, you will deal more damage, further emphasizing how important your position is in battle. Another important thing to consider is that it's so far significantly more reliable than in Like a Dragon, but this game does still use hitboxes for all of the attacks. This means that if something got in your way a little bit, or if your character didn't really walk close enough, your attacks will miss because the animations literally didn't connect. You do still have a random chance to miss or dodge, but these hitbox problems are things you don't ever see in other RPGs, because in stuff like Xenoblade, for example, you just have to be in an attack range, and then no matter where you swing, you'll hit the enemy. But now on the other end of the position-based spectrum, in Like a Dragon, if you did a regular attack on an enemy, enemy, but there was a different enemy standing between you and your target, the one that was in between could attack you and interrupt the attack. This wasn't at all a thing when you did a skill, as enemies could not interrupt you no matter what, and it was incredibly annoying, as beyond the fact that they were typically much weaker and only some jobs gained an extra benefit with regular attacks, this interruption mechanic massively disincentivized regular attacks, as you couldn't control your character and they could very easily put themselves into a shit position. I am very glad to say that that feature has been completely removed, even though you can actually position yourself into a better spot. The enemies will even dodge out of your way to let you run past them, which when combined with the positional advantages you get with regular attacks, further encourages the use of regular attacks. And you know what else does? Some jobs in Like a Dragon let you recover MP from basic attacks. But just like how everyone got access to weapon attacks, everyone now always can recover MP from basic attacks in Infinite Wealth. This is really good because it's yet another amazing thing to incentivize you to use basic attacks more, because they really were just a bad option most of the time in Like a Dragon. This also is interesting because in Like a Dragon, MP was intentionally the turn-based equivalent to heat from previous Yakuza games, but now it's even more so because you generate heat from your normal attacks. But for a more specific thing, it's time to mention some unique Kiryu stuff. First and foremost, the most popular thing to come from Kiryu is that he can break the turn-based system and turn it into an action game. When this happens, it plays the song Bishop Violet Velveteen from Yakuza 6, which is oddly specific, but I guess they just liked that song around the office and thought to use it instead of, you know, Funk Goes On, which I think would have been cooler, but oh well. Just like a chain attack in Xenoblade 3, this song will indeed interrupt boss music, so god damn it. Kiryu's unique job, the Dragon of Dojima, has access to multiple fighting styles, with Rush and Beast being usable for the first time since Yakuza Kiwami, although if you want to be pedantic, Kaito got Beast in Lost Judgment, and Brawler for the first time since Kiwami as well, / Kaito in Lost Judgment again. These styles are the same three that he uses in his boss fight in Yakuza Like a Dragon, meaning that actual Brawler isn't available. And that's because weirdly, Dragon style and Brawler style have had some sort of hybrid child together. Why do I say that? Well, because it has the old image from Kiwami's Dragon style as the style icon, but it has the classic Yakuza 0 and Kiwami blue coloring from Brawler's style icons. But then the stance and movement is the Dragon style, as well as the attack animations, but then there's stuff like this little hook that he can do that's very Brawler-esque. Look, I get that they likely named it Brawler because his job is named Dragon of Dojima, so it could have potentially caused a bit of confusion, but like, come on man, you could have actually added Brawler back. But then another funny thing with his styles is that the red coloring that was used for Kiwami's Dragon style icon is the same red that's now been applied to the Rush icon, which previously was pink. But you know what though, it at least kind of means that the Brawler style has now just been inherited by Kaito and it's his style now. And speaking of his style, specifically Kaito's sprinting kick on a downed enemy that he had with the Beast or Tank style as it was called, has now been given to Kiryu with the Beast style. So yeah, not really important, but just a funny observation. Back to universal things, every character besides Ichiban gets this little infinity gauge called the Hype Meter next to their little character portraits. For specifically Kiryu, not just the Dragon of Dojima job, he gets to do his stupidly overpowered thing by holding the associated button where it turns the game into Yakuza 6. But the whole party does have access to an ultimate tag team attack. For Ichiban, he does an attack that he had in Like a Dragon, where every party member who currently has their hype meter filled participates in one big attack. Everyone else, including Kiryu, will drag Ichiban into their attacks instead. All of these will then give a buff to everyone who participated. This buff, on top of massively increased damage and the fact that the attack consumes no MP, makes these tag team attacks 100 times better than the one from Like a Dragon, which only consumed Ichiban's MP, as well as my time and brain cells for deciding that it was ever a good idea to use. Perfect guards, which was when you would time a guard button press right as the enemy hit a party member, have a little bit of hit stop, which unfortunately slows things down a little and can definitely impact your timing, but at least it gives it a bit more impact to them. So visually, they are better, but functionally, not so much. Although I think this was something in Like a Dragon, but you can perfect guard even if you're already guarding, so I don't know if that changes the damage you receive or anything, but again, I think it was in the last game. Just like perfect guards, critical hits are significantly more obvious now, as they also have a bit of hit stop whenever they're landed. I also haven't seen any blue numbers show up, but TBH, I genuinely have no idea what the hell that signified in Like a Dragon, because I assumed it was like a magic critical hit, but I don't know. Now it's just white numbers for damage to enemies, yellow/orange numbers for back attacks or crits, and red numbers for damage to party members. Or at least that's how it works in the demo, and if I play the full game and see a blue number, I'm going to riot. Pound mates, or summons if we're talking general RPG terms, work the same way with it costing money to summon, and that some summons just appear, do a little cutscene, then deal damage or do whatever effect. However, some pound mates can now actually stick around and become a pseudo party member, doing their own things in their own turns. Now this was in Like a Dragon, although there were very little of them, but there are basically attack enchantments with some of the skills. skills. For example, there are blunt skills that are essentially enchanted with, say, electricity. This means that you can smack someone and still deal a good portion of damage even though they might resist the element, compared to just using an electric attack. This should hopefully mean that if an enemy resists electric, the bonus effect of the element would be lessened, and the leftover blunt damage shouldn't be too strong so that it doesn't just outright replace a regular blunt attack. But there were a lot of should-haves with Like a Dragon's damage values, so I suppose we'll see if these skills might just be stupidly overpowered. But the reason I bring that up is because while I once again believe it functioned like this in Like a Dragon, they have made an effort to specifically mention when an attack will apply your equipped weapon's attribute, such as Ichiban's electric bat. But again, we'll see how these sorts of attacks pan out. Speaking of, there are some new status conditions that affect yours or the enemy's elemental resistances. For example, Tomizawa has an attack that can lower an enemy's electric resistance, which is a nice little change to add. For the rest of the status elements, I don't know what else is new beyond the resistance ones, or what's the same or what's removed, because again, this isn't the full game. And the final combat thing before I move on to more UI and menu related thingies is that in the demo, there is no auto battle. But from promotional materials such as trailers and screenshots, you can see auto battle is there. Anyway, there are now new status effect icons. The backgrounds of these icons will be different colors than just the universal gray like in Like a Dragon, but I don't know if the colors have any significance beyond visual style. They probably do, so yeah, just keep that in mind, maybe. One thing you can definitely keep in mind though is that the game will show you if someone will actually guard your attacks, rather than you just having to guess with supreme knowledge of the game or something. Previously, if an enemy did guard, there was no visual indication that they would, besides maybe a stance change, which wasn't too useful because if that did exist, it was obviously so hard to notice that I forgot. But speaking of, grapple attacks that could break through guards did exist in Like a Dragon, such as head trauma or the German suplex. But as you can guess, they made grapples or other guard breaking attacks into an actual thing now. Previously, if you did grab a guarding enemy, it would say that they guarded the first hit, and for any subsequent hit to not say that they were guarding, which was quite confusing, but now you just break right through that guard icon and attack the enemy. As you can imagine though, enemies can do the same to you, so keep that in mind. Another thing from Like a Dragon is that the 4 main commands still spell out Sega, which was something the English team only added last minute because originally the etc. option said more. If you look closely, you can see some Japanese writing in there. Something that's pretty fun about that is that in Japanese, it's swapped around so you see the English on the bottom. A small thing, but it's just a nice little thing to see because it still says Sega, even in Japanese now, and is a good demonstration of how much closer the American and Japanese teams have become for these games. Not sure what it says in other languages. I could test, but for now I'm not bothering because it's a pain in the ass to even launch the demo in English. The HUD, although it's functionally identical to Yakuza Like a Dragon's, looks a lot nicer. Like with the Japanese font in the English version, or with things like the enemies up in the top corner being a lot cleaner, and the commands and character icons looking a lot cooler. The HUD colors also still match what controller you use, although rather than the text changing, it's the glow around the icons. Once again though, the colors are just the classic PlayStation colors, despite the PS5 ditching that, and the Xbox colors, which also applies to every other controller type such as keyboard and mouse, and the Nintendo Switch Pro Controller. Besides the standard tabs to sort items and abilities from Like a Dragon, you can now click in the stick to sort items in combat. Still can't sort skills, and I wish that there was a way you could, like just sorting things by MP cost or allowing you to pick favorites that will always be up at the top, but yeah, well. In the skills menu, when you look at your skills, the details of the power and the amount of enemies that get hit is the same as it was in Like a Dragon, but the third subsection, rather than being a display of which button or buttons you push for extra damage, it instead tells you whether it's a grapple attack, knockback attack, or just a regular one. The action prompts, as they're called, still do function the exact same way though. Bonus effects from skills such as status elements, stat changes, or whatever else are now highlighted in yellow in their descriptions, which is a super simple thing that now that I have it, I wonder why the hell they'd never thought to do it in the original game, because it just means that at a glance you can see what is actually the key benefit to picking a certain skill. Another good thing is that it seems like there's much more skill variety in Infinite Wealth. With a character like Tomizawa, he has a handful of skills that all serve different purposes, rather than them all just being different animations to deal damage to the enemy. Hopefully it's not just a demo thing, but in Like a Dragon you would have so many skills that would all do the exact same thing. Didn't matter what job or character you had, although it was especially bad with Zhao as a breaker for example, but pretty much everyone had like 10 completely obsolete skills that weren't like starter skills, but ones you actually had to unlock. Like what was the point of any of Junki-Han's blunt attacks when you start with head trauma, or Ruffian's Kick, like, come on man. The balancing also feels much better in Infinite Wealth. Skills that cost more and claim to do more feel like they actually do, and jobs don't seem to just have 100 blunt attacks that all do the same thing. I hope that in the full game that's still the case, or at least if there are a bunch of skills and multiple ones that do the same thing, that they actually are balanced out properly, but once again, we'll have to wait and see. Now, unless it's a thing just in the demo, although that seemingly might not be the case, there are no shortcuts in the game. It's sad to see it go because I know it made speedrunning much quicker, so rip froob, but it was also a nice little quality of life thing. If shortcuts are actually removed, and I'm not mistaken, I hope that the reason for that is because the ability balancing is so much better than Like a Dragon that you don't want shortcuts, because in that game, just having only 4 skills that you can quickly select wasn't a hindrance, as with Junki-Han, for example, you'd just set Head Trauma and Divine Shot to a shortcut and just win automatically. Although another reason it might exist for the removal of shortcuts is because of how the Dragon job requires you to use the D-pad to select your fighting styles, so you can't use the D-pad for shortcuts, and more jobs may also have similar functions. In saying that though, if the developers see this and they still have the time to do it, R1 or RB do nothing in combat, so you could make it that you hold down one of those buttons and use the D-pad, and you could even have 8 shortcuts if you change L1 or LB to a shortcut button and make clicking in the left stick the runaway button instead of it being L1 or LB, but that's just my suggestion. Back in Like a Dragon, leveling up your character would get you dick all, but leveling up your job would get you a bunch of stat increases. It's the opposite now in Infinite Wealth, or at least seemingly so, which is good because there was a big problem in Like a Dragon where whenever you swap to a brand new job, your stats would be super shit until you got a few job rank ups. So now what you should be able to do is swap around jobs more frequently and freely, as your character's level is the far more important factor in your overall strength. Also, when you level up, it'll show your character in their regular old outfit, but when your job levels up, it'll show your character in their job outfit. I don't know if Like a Dragon did that, though I could just be misremembering, but if not, it's a nice little touch. Speaking of stats, Willpower is a new stat, which I can only imagine is meant to be magic defense. Healing was removed, and so was Dexterity, although Dexterity may have been combined with Agility and healing with magic. In Like a Dragon, the game never told you what Dexterity or Agility did, but a character like Junki-Han had 1,000,000 Agility, and he would dodge every attack like Dunban from Xenoblade 1, except he was on crack and had a gun. So I'm not sure what these stats all do, but for now my assumption is just Agility affects things like evasion and accuracy and maybe critical hit chances, and Willpower, if other RPGs are anything to go off of, will be your magic defense. Gear still works the exact same way as Like a Dragon, although weapons have a little brand tab that shows their enhancements. I have no idea how that works, but I can only imagine it will be a similar thing to the weaponsmith from Like a Dragon, where you could upgrade your gear, but for now, it's a full game thing. With the jobs, they have a little display showing the stat distribution for the jobs when you go to change them. For example, Ichiban's hero job is perfectly balanced, and the Dragon of Dojima job is focused more on specifically melee and HP. Jobs will also come with natural attack type resistances, and speaking of, those resistances don't seem to be percentage based and are probably now a flat % reduction. You can't check what skills each job has, but I can only assume that's a thing that'll be available in the full game. However, what I mentioned before about the percentage reduction is related to something I've brought up previously that was a problem in Like a Dragon, so I apologize to everyone who's heard this before, but in Like a Dragon, no matter how small or how large your, say, blade resistance was, being hit with any blade attack would always prompt you with a big fat resist next to your damage numbers. This could cause a lot of confusion, as 2 enemies or party members could resist a certain attack type, but one will get absolutely clapped by a sword because they only had a 1% reduction, and the other tanks it like a beast because they had a 60% reduction. So I am very much hoping that it's more like Pokemon or SMT, where resisting something is just a flat damage reduction, as otherwise it'll just be annoying and confusing as shit. In Like a Dragon, each character had specific traits that allowed them to be more resistant to specific status elements. For example, Nanba was resistant to getting a cold. Whether or not that meant that they were immune, I don't know, but Ichiban's status element resistances were based off of his personality stats, and so as they would increase, so too would his resistance. In this game, Ichiban's still the same, but rather than having to either remember, look it up online, which is impossible apparently, or digging forever through the help menu to figure out what resists what, this game will display each character's specific specialty in the party tab, and so for Kiryu he resists charm and fear, although some characters can also have weaknesses, such as Tomizawa being weak to fear. If you look through Ichiban's stats too, it shows that, for example, his sleep resistance increases as his charm does, but also his personality stats will increase his encouragement, guts, blessing, healing, wisdom, and flair, which I don't know what the fuck any of that means besides maybe healing, but it's something. And another thing, he also seems to unlock a skill inheritance slot as his personality increases, with the other party members gaining those slots as their bond increases. Before I continue, I'll quickly say as well that a character's bond with Ichiban seems to provide more benefits than it previously did, as you can see here on your screen. But anyway, what I'm assuming those skill inheritance slots mean is that the character skills from Like a Dragon that can be unlocked on a job, but then used on any job once unlocked, probably need to be slotted into specific skill inheritance slots. But what I can only beg, dream, and hope for is that these inheritance slots can be used for any skill from any job that they've unlocked, because far out, I mean, Freelancer was pretty shit in Like a Dragon, and it should have just worked like it does in Final Fantasy V. But anyway, from looking at the most recent, as of this recording, Like a Dragon Day stream with Sega of America, they were a much higher level than in the demo, and you could see from their skills that they had a large number of them like in Like a Dragon. But there was no character-specific skills. These were things like Stack Slap that Ichiban could unlock that would be available on all jobs, but this also meant that they didn't have the ones I mentioned previously that were job skills that could be used on any job. What might be the case is just that the save file that they used for that stream just happened to have unlocked the skills in that way. But again, what I can only hope for is that it's because there are far less universal skills, or at least that they're far less accessible like with the inheritance slots, because they absolutely destroyed the balancing in the last game. But another bond related thing is that I don't know if a character's bond will lock certain jobs away like it did in Like a Dragon, and that's because it seems like Ichiban's personality stats are a requirement for these new little things that reward you and the rest of your party with a new job. What are these little things, you might ask? Well, realistically what they are revelations from the older games, which haven't appeared in the series since Yakuza 0, although technically they were last in Ishin Kiwami last year, but whatever. How revelations used to work was that you would go to a spot, look at a thing, watch a little cutscene and do some quick time events, then pick the correct response, and you would then unlock a new heat action. As time went on, Yakuza 5 removed the dialogue choice, so you would just automatically get the heat action if you did the quick time prompts correctly. Then Ishin did its own thing, then Yakuza 0 just had you watch a cutscene and you'd unlock a new fighting style. So the reason I explained all of that is basically just to say that they are definitely back, and are just like the Yakuza 0 ones, only they aren't tied to story progression and are back to being optional things you can choose to unlock. Speaking of Ichiban and jobs, he has a new pose for his hero style, which yes, there are a lot of new animations and stuff for most things, but this one I felt was worth pointing out as it's a very obvious reference to his appearance in the western box art of Like a Dragon. Then the Kiwami attacks and summons in Like a Dragon were all in this random car park looking area. It didn't matter where you were or what the attack was, it was always just in this one spot, with the only variation being a prop that might get added, like the building in Majima's summon. In this game, there are a bunch of new areas that can show up for specific attacks, but it's also based off of your location for some of them. For example, in a car park, it'll be a car park again, or if you're on the beach, it'll be on the beach, or one that isn't based off of your location is this Ghost of Tsushima-ass one with the samurai job. These are super cool to see, as previously they were quite boring. And then the final combat specific point is that in the settings they still have the battle speed option. This was in Like a Dragon as well, but honestly I completely forgot it existed until I played the demo of Infinite Wealth, and so I can safely say that if you don't know how it actually works, well that's okay, because I don't know how the hell it works either. Here is a side-by-side comparison between normal battle speed and slow battle speed, and I can guarantee you there will be not any noticeable difference, but maybe there is, I don't know. The game's slow enough, like what even would be the purpose of this setting? You can just stop time by not inputting a command, like what? I promise I definitely didn't forget to say this in the voiceover, but attacks that have multiple hits will actually show you the total amount of damage that attack did at the end, which is indicated by a bigger number. And also, buffs and debuffs can actually stack now, whereas before recasting the same skill would just reset the timer. The max stack is still 3 times though. And now I move on to the open world aspect of Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, covering new stuff relating to exploration and whatever. To start, French cuisine, with an F. Anyway, the actual most important thing is the brand new area that's explorable in the game. It is, for a franchise first, set outside of Japan, being the United States of America, or more specifically in beautiful Hawaii. Because of the fact that this is a new country, the world designers went absolutely all out in once again creating a true-to-life map, filled to the brim with many small details that when combined add a lot of detail. This means we get to use US dollars as currency and hear people speaking English on the streets, and this also means that there are real brands such as the ABC NPC stores and 88Ts, so once again they're doing a really good job at blending real and fake together to create an incredibly believable world. There are so many new fake and real brands and random products that I can only imagine they would have had a shitload of fun making. Like, what the fuck is cheese milk? Now if that's real, I'm gonna declare war with America. There is a ludicrous amount of detail and decorations everywhere that you could legit just get lost looking at it all. Even in this little 88Ts shop, there's a bunch of photos of customers, but you can see they're all very clearly in-game screenshots, which is hilarious. Another nice thing is that there's a significantly more diverse range when it comes to the people you see. These people are much more varied in their heights, builds, hair, faces, races, whatever the hell this guy was doing. They're from all walks of life, and it feels much nicer than previously where most NPCs all looked the same because they only had a couple of different body models that they never swapped around and not that many different face models, which meant that you were significantly more likely to encounter identical clones compared to how it is in the new game. You also no longer tower over all of the people, considering the average height of protagonist is about 6 feet and the average height of a Japanese person is apparently 5'12" or something. I don't know how the imperial system works, it sucks. But it's nice to see because it makes it feel like there are significantly more people in the world than the one old dude with a long coat who constantly appears in every game ever since Yakuza 6. I know there's a certain crowd of people that like to cry that these games are becoming more woke and will probably use this as evidence, but hey man, maybe if you actually went outside, you might have a heart attack, probably from being severely overweight, but what's more likely is you might get the fright of your life at the sight of people from other countries. Oh, there was also a sign that I found that says no turn on red, obviously being a red light, and I don't know if a sign like this exists in real life, because if it is, yeah, no shit. You're not supposed to do anything at red light, that's the point of them. Everything about Hawaii looks and feels real, and just like how exploring Japan in previous games is cool because of all the detail, I'm sure even people who live in Hawaii will get to have a lot of fun looking at all the sights and sounds at this place. Moving on the map screen, you can fast travel directly to a taxi spot without having to open up your phone or go to a taxi in the first place. You can also view a shop and see some of the sort of items that they have for sale, or see things like your restaurant menu completion, which is very nice and convenient. Also, at various little spots, you can go and buy gifts for party members, which will increase your bonds with them. Nothing crazy, but does make it a bit easier to raise bond levels. You can ride around on a little Segway or scooter or whatever these things are called. Unfortunately, you can't use it forever like the skateboard in Lost Judgment, as you do have to top up its battery every now and then. You can also customize it, again just like the skateboard, and you also have the option to just press a button and automatically accelerate, although you are almost guaranteed to get hit by a car if you just put your controller down. Also, just like how your movement isn't impaired when you're drunk in Infinite Wealth and like a dragon, your scooter riding abilities aren't affected either, and I bring that up because if you even think about alcohol and hop on your skateboard in Lost Judgment, you will explode. But now that he's had a few years to figure out how a phone works, Ichiban downloaded Spotify in his spare time, and so now you have access to a music player whenever you want. So far in the demo, it's just some Yakuza 0 disco songs, and a couple of songs from the original Ishin, but I certainly hope there's a lot more variety in the songs than there was in Like a Dragon at Survive Bar, because that was a bit piss. But still, it's a pretty cool feature to have, although I do kinda wish it could continue playing your music when you'd go into regular encounters, but oh well. Treasure hunts are still in the game, although instead of grabbing something underneath a vending machine, you now reach underneath parked cars, into dumpsters, and shoulder charged trees, which is funny. You can swim now too, which is probably going to be more useful on Dondogo Island, but you can go out and grab some items in the water with treasure hunts, or get hit by a boat and take damage. Out in the open world, when an enemy sees you, a little bar will show up that will indicate when they'll actually start a fight with you, rather than it just being a question mark, then an exclamation mark, and a massive bloody guess. There are also these street bosses that spawn in specific locations now, which can be a nice little challenge, and they'll provide you with more substantial rewards than a standard encounter, like more XP or money or some sort of item like a safe key. It can now randomly rain, and it doesn't look the best, but it is still very cool that it's a thing, as the RGG games have historically decided to just never play around with the weather in their games, because they'll have it rain for a minute and then it will never rain for the rest of the game, and they really should have had a toggle in Premium Adventure to just turn on or off the rain, but yeah, well. Now, just like how Yakuza 6 changed the camera from previous games, the camera has once again been changed in this game. In combat, it's basically the same as it was in Like a Dragon, where you can only look left and right, although I'm aware no one will care about this, but your field of view is actually maintained in combat, as opposed to Like a Dragon, where it just had a fixed field of view in combat no matter what. But anyway, the camera snaps around a bit faster now, and the angles that it holds are much different. I don't really know how to describe it, but if you look at enough gameplay of previous games versus this one, or if you go and play the games, you'll see what I mean. Table talks look a little different. They've ditched the visual novel style head cut-ins and replaced them with the people involved in the chat actually sitting around a table, which is very nice. Restaurants work the same way as Like a Dragon besides that though. But one very specific thing to point out, which really bums me out, is that just like in the previous game, when you eat at a restaurant, you do get the visual novel cut-ins, and each man will say, "Itadakimasu," to which his party will all respond with, "Itadakimasu." This is the exact same in Infinite Wealth, and in the Chinese dub, which, yes, I'll get to that eventually. I don't know what they say in Chinese, but they do all say the same thing, so I can only assume it's a similar thing to Japanese or something. But in the English dub of Like a Dragon, Ichiban will say, "Who's hungry?" To which the party would respond with, "Me! Me!" Because we don't have eat a dick en masse, so instead, in English, it's like Ichiban's bringing the food over to the table, which is very cute. But now, in the English dub of Infinite Wealth, rather than just doing the exact same thing and reusing the voice lines, they changed it. They all just say their own thing, and Ichiban is so like, damn man, I could eat a whole horse, sheesh.
Oh, I'm starving. Let's dig in.
What are we waiting for?
Why would you do this to me, Sega of America? Why? Although, speaking of Sega of America, Ichiban brought Nancy with him all the way to Hawaii, which is both very cute and very funny at the same time, because in the actual game, Nancy is just in one sub-story and then you get a summon and she serves no other purpose. But for some reason, the old Western team really stuck to Nancy, putting her in the box art of the game and even doing a funny little video with Nancy and Keiji Tang. So this feels like some leftover influence from whoever it was on the American team that was infatuated with Nancy. Speaking of cute things, there are big fat Labradors running around and I'm so happy. They're all so beautiful. I love them. Even with their AI bugs out, look at them. So they just get stuck. Look, Ichiban now has the ability to say g'day to NPCs, which is an actual mechanic that you can use to make friends, which I don't really know what the point of it is, but at least it's pretty funny to just say aloha to literally everyone you see. You can also be all, hello, anyone there? Whenever there isn't an NPC in close enough proximity. The American NPCs, as I mentioned briefly before, all have their own little dialogue when they're walking around, and some of it is juicy as shit. Obviously, I couldn't understand all of the Japanese NPC dialogue in previous games because I don't speak the language, but it really seems like some of this Hawaii dialogue is incredibly extensive. Like, these dudes will have full-on conversations that lead into massive character arcs to go into depth about the full history of their lives, and most of you'll just completely miss because you ran right past them. I can also recognize a bunch of voice actors like Jameson Price and Bryce Papenbrook, so I can only imagine this dialogue was handled by the English team. The reason I bring that up is because, in all honesty, I was 100% expecting them to just find some people that claim to speak English over in Japan and that the Japanese team would have handled it. I could honestly spend all day listening to the gossip they're spilling, and for little old me, I enjoy trying to spot voice actors I recognize, but that's just because I'm autistic. But yeah, no, seriously, dude, it's like the voice actors just hopped into the booth and literally just started talking about real-life drama from their lives. It's insane. But anyway, on top of the point I mentioned a while back about people from all walks of life, an incredibly strange observation to make is that there are now actually children that can wander around in the open world, which the last game to do that was Ishin, and I honestly can't think of any other games in the series to actually do that. The reason why that's a big deal is just because it adds more believability to the world, and also because it makes it just seem like Japan has no one younger than 20, although to be honest, given their rapidly aging population, that honestly does seem realistic. The phone camera has a bunch of new filters, such as a fisheye lens and an ultra-wide camera. It also has a bunch more options for the controls, which lets you take nicer photos than you could previously, such as being able to get everyone to stand in the frame, but they have unfortunately not added in Ishin's photo mode, but I am aware that that was pretty much only in there because it's like a box you tick in Unreal Engine games, basically. Also, this is just a random thing that really is completely irrelevant, but it was pissing me off so much because I couldn't figure out what it was. But there's this little beep noise that randomly plays, which sounds identical to Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom's radar pings that they have. I don't know what it is, but I want to figure it out because I'm not near any shrines, but I keep on thinking that I am, and it's playing tricks on my bloody mind. Also, are these what your credit card machines look like over there? I know you guys are super far behind because apparently you only just started using PayWave recently, even though we've been using it for like 20 years, but what the hell is this thing? Also, this statue of a luchador with a sombrero that was just randomly there in Yokohama is now here in Hawaii at the pawn shop. Not important, but secretly it's very important. And finally, birds. Unfortunately, the active defense system seems to exist here too, and they get exploded when they fly away. But now that's all for the exploration and open world aspects of this game, and it's time for the final section, being all of the miscellaneous stuff that is incredibly important and you should keep watching. The first and honestly biggest of these not as important but still important things is the Chinese dub, which for many people could potentially be very important. I don't know who handled that dub at all, nor do I know any of the actors or anything like that, but it's surprisingly high quality. Just like Judgment and Fist of the North Star Lost Paradise bringing back dubs for RGG games around 2018, adding a Chinese dub just means more people have more options for what they want to hear, which then allows for more people to potentially have more incentive to play, which leads to more sales, and more sales means more money for Sega, so that's why they did English dubs, you dickhead, shut up. Anyway, regardless of what language you play in, you'll likely have subtitles on. The subtitle settings from Ishin and Gaiden last year are still present in this game, which adds things like speaker names and changing the color so it's a bit easier to read or understand. Another thing from Gaiden is that this game has an actual HDR mouse setting in the menu, and while I can't properly show it to you in a video without doing a bunch of annoying shit, trust me when I say it looks very nice. And once again, Gaiden was technically the first to do this, but it clearly must have been something they made for this game that they then chucked into Gaiden. But the parts of your clothes that touch the water will get wet, and the parts that didn't do not get wet. This was a thing in previous games, although honestly I only ever noticed it in Lost Judgment. But the reason I bring this up is because how it looks in Gaiden and Infinite Wealth is much better now. And also, when you run around in the sand, you'll get sand all over your legs and feet. This isn't anything crazy considering a game like GTA 5 did this back in 2013, but it is something cool to see for the series. And you know what? While peak gaming is on my mind, this game still has Lost Judgment stairs, which if you don't know what I mean by that, Lost Judgment had this weird thing where if you pressed up against the wall too much when going downstairs, you'll just fall down them. Ichiban also still has his completely unique running animation, although when you tap left and right a bunch, he does the Lost Judgment turning animations. And he also now has something that once again technically is from Gaiden but was likely made for this game and retroactively ported to Gaiden, where if you press up against a wall and run away sideways, you do this little pushing animation. The turning animations and the wall pressing stuff is done to add a bit more realism, but I like to make it look very goofy. Again, really specific, but that's the point of this video. Next is a small thing, but when you press L1, LB, L or V to hide the party display, the button will move into the corner of the screen, which it didn't originally in Like a Dragon, and it would piss me off. You can also click in the right stick, or whatever equivalent button, to zoom out the minimap, which wasn't a thing in Like a Dragon, but has been available in most of the other games, with Lost Judgment having it, for example. Also, I could have mentioned this in another section, but Ichiban is always pulling his iconic face in the menus, and in the level up screen, which he had in his original render artwork, but I wish he wouldn't, because it looks a bit creepy, especially since he doesn't blink properly. Look, these next few things might be spoilers, but Chitose's portrait and hair was different between the demo and the version of the game that they showed off in the most recent RGG roundup thing, as well as it being briefly visible in some trailers, so either they changed her hair or that's some sort of story spoiler that I don't understand just yet, where Chitose cuts her hair or something, so whoopsie doopsie. But also, Adachi had the Dragon of Dojima fighting styles next to him in a screenshot, but then a future screenshot came out and it didn't have it, so either you can unlock the ability to equip character-specific jobs to anyone, or that was just an error. And that is the end of my somehow extremely long list of stuff, even though the demo was like 4.5 milliseconds. Anything not mentioned in this video was either because I wasn't aware it was a thing, was so impossibly small that not even I thought to mention it, or is stuff that's typically new in any sequel that I think would be more fun to figure out for yourself, like all the new jobs, skills, minigames, party members, gear, shop, so on and so forth. Now, one thing to keep in mind when the full game comes out is that every single thing I said within this video can and may very well be changed. There's a lot that I highly doubt they would change, but there's some stuff like the French cuisine, which will probably see a fix. But anyway, if you like the video, be sure to click like on the video. Be sure to click the like button. Look, I'm just testing out that feature where apparently the like button glows because I haven't seen that. But yeah, click like and subscribe and ring the bell. I'm absolutely bursting with excitement to play Infinite Wealth, and I'm very much looking forward to some of the other games coming out very soon, with those being Tekken 8, Persona 3 Reload, and 7 Rebirth. This also isn't my first video of the year, but Happy New Year to everyone watching, and happy birthday to Ichiban. I hope your 2023 was great, and that your 2024 can be that much more awesome, because I don't know about you, but apparently the first few months are going to devour my soul, and I don't really know how to end the video, so click like and subscribe.